If you're in Medellin and you need dental work done, from a basic cleaning to major reconstructive surgery, come see my guy, Dr. Carlos Mori. Contact information in the description below. If you are looking to stay in Colombia for any extended period of time, this video is for you. In this video, we speak with Alan Gongora with the Langon Law Firm about the proposed visa changes. You're going to want to see this one. Follow along.
You're watching dcbornrob, erasing borders. And now, the news.
Remember, if you're getting any benefit out of my videos, do me a favor, go down and hit the subscribe button, click the bell to be alerted of any new videos, and like. Like helps the YouTube algorithm. This is part one of my interview. Okay, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever it is you're located. Thanks for watching. My name is Rob Christian, also known as dcbornrob, Rob, I answer to them all. Today I have a special guest. This is his second time on the show. I have Alan Gongora with the Langon Law Firm. How you doing, Alan?
Pretty good, pretty good. Good to hear from you, Rob.
Yes, sir. Well, I saw your post, I think it was last month, about the proposed visa changes for Colombia. And I know I have a lot of viewers who are expats and business owners and those who are thinking about starting businesses here or getting married as well. And they're going to have some questions. I know there's going to be a few proposed, or there are a few proposed changes. The digital nomad visa, they're creating the rentista visa, residency-based visa, residency based on investment visa, and for the marriage visa as well. Can you elaborate on each one, like from beginning to the end? And the floor is yours. You can go as long as you want, as much time as you have, but yeah, however long it takes to get this information out.
Got it. So the first, I kind of want to start by explaining, I would say, kind of the highlights. You know, what is going on with Colombian visas right now. And so let me back up a little, if that's okay. So laws and regulations anywhere in the world will eventually be changed. They're modified, they're updated. Things happen which makes the government decide to change those things for any number of public policy reasons, to improve the process, to make it much more professional, that sort of thing. And back in 2014, I believe, that was the first time that we experienced this process, which is a complete change to the rules. Back in 2017 was the second time that we went through it, which was insane. In a second, we'll talk about that. And then back in 2019, a proposed set of rules were actually published, which dramatically changed the visa rules in Colombia. But those rules were never implemented, likely because of COVID. You know, COVID delayed everything, right? So these new rules seem to be the rules that they're trying to approve this year, post the emergency that the Colombian government saw during the COVID pandemic. So that gives you a little bit of context. Could these rules, again, they haven't been approved. These are proposed changes. To date, all that's happened is that they've published them publicly in order to receive public comments. In the fastest possible scenario, these rules will be approved by, let's say, April, right? But it's possible, and in my estimation, likely, that closer to May or June seems to be where this is going to be going. Now, could the same thing happen that happened back in 2019, and maybe they publish these proposed rules and they just take longer and longer and it just doesn't happen immediately? It's possible. My sense is that this year it will happen, and will happen faster than you think. Does that make sense?
Sure.
All right. The second thing I want to mention is that, again, these are proposed rules. So we're going to talk about what the proposed rules look like. But until they actually publish final rules, there's not much to talk about, because we just don't know what the actual terms are going to be. And from experience, I can tell you that over 90%, maybe 95% of proposed rules are eventually approved. In other words, back in 2014, if I recall correctly, definitely 2017, you know, when they made these publications, most of what was proposed was approved. So if they continue that trajectory, a lot, if not most of what we'll talk about today will eventually be approved, okay? Finally, and I cannot overstress this enough, I just can't, okay? It's gonna be a mess. like a complete and utter mess, okay? Again, we've done this a couple of times already, and every single time it's insanity, right? So let's say this thing is finally approved. Once it's approved, it'll take 2 or 3 months before it's actually implemented. So in other words, between approval and the actual implementation, there's this weird period where people can start an application and some government officials will start using the rules that will actually be in place months from now. Some will continue using the current rules, but it's just completely inconsistent, okay? After the implementation, some officials will continue using the old rules, right? You go to some of these migration offices, this is where you go and talk about your visa situation in person. You'll talk to one guy and they'll give you the rules from the old rules. You'll talk to another guy and they'll tell you something completely different because it's the new rules. And on top of that, even the new rules, no one really knows how things will shake out until maybe 6 months from then. Because as decisions are made, people in power will figure out how to implement them. One thing is what the document says. Another thing is how it actually is implemented. So again, be prepared for insanity. My sense is if you want to apply for a visa and you don't want this insanity in front of you, you might want to wait at least 6 months after the actual rules are implemented. Does that make sense?
Okay. Sure.
Okay, good. All right, so let's talk about these proposed rules. First, the good news, and you mentioned one already, and that is they're attempting in their own weird way to professionalize and modernize the rules, okay? A good example is what you mentioned, the nomad visa. So everyone who's come to Colombia, particularly places like Medellin, parts of Bogota, will tell you foreigners, a good portion of foreigners who come are these so-called nomads. These are people who travel, they work remotely. Some are, out and out entrepreneurs. Others literally are working virtually for their company at home. So that's a really good thing because a good number of these guys would come to Colombia. Their situation currently doesn't quite fit any of the current visa categories. So the fact that they're thinking of putting together this category is fantastic because it will absolutely help this category of applicants. That's great. I love it. And other things, like for example, right this second, you can't, if you apply for a student visa, it needs to be a visa where you are physically studying at a specific location. Otherwise, it won't count. But with the new rules, they're trying to modernize. So now it could feasibly happen that you can actually apply for a virtual student visa, right? So you can actually study from home. Another thing that I think shows this intention of modernizing the process is, for example, right now, if you want to get a student visa, you actually physically have to study somewhere. You have to go somewhere, sit down in a school classroom and study. They're adding virtual studies, which is really novel. It's good. It's a good update to the rules. And again, there are nooks and crannies in these new rule proposals that are, show this need or this intention of modernizing the process, which, by the way, I think is a good, it sounds good, okay? But now let's talk about, we talked about the good, let's talk about the bad, right? So what's the bad? There are some key long-standing visas that they're demoting or eliminating completely, right? And in particular, it's really strange. There are certain visas that allow high net worth people, people who have some money to invest in the country, those visas are either being demoted or being eliminated completely. And the most popular one, I think, for a lot of foreigners is the residency visa based on investment. This is where a foreigner comes to Colombia, they invest something around 160,000 US dollars. You know, that number will vary, but it's technically 650 times the local minimum wage. And the most popular type of investment is buying property. It's not the only one, but that's what a lot of people use to get residency. They buy a property and they get that type of visa. With these new rules, that goes away. It's gone, right? If you still want to buy property, you can still get a visa. You can get what's called a migrant visa, right? It's a lower level visa. It's a 3-year visa. If you keep that visa for 5 years, you can then get residency. But now there's no direct path to residency. And that's a little strange because if I'm the Colombian government, I assume I would want to receive foreign direct investment, right? It's a way to generate investment and tax revenue. So it's really strange. The other one that I've noticed, there's a migrant visa. Again, it's not a residency visa, but it's a migrant visa. It's a way, it's called a rentista visa or annuity visa. And I affectionately call it the trust fund baby visa, right? This is where a person receives a regular monthly payment from some source, usually an investment, maybe rental income, something. And it's above a certain level. And if you do, you get a migrant visa and you eventually get residency in 5 years. With these new rules, that's gone. It's now a visitor's visa, which is a much lower tier of a visa. You will never get residency that way, right? So it's a little strange that it seems like the Colombian government is not prioritizing foreign direct investment, or at least prioritizing entry for people who can afford it and who can add to the local economy. And you know, there's other changes. You know, there's the motion. If you, for example, were to father a child in Colombia, that child would technically be a Colombian citizen. But you know, current rules allow you to become a resident. Not anymore. You know, you now get a migrant visa. You can eventually get it. But you know, there are things like that in these rules that give you pause, right? So we'll see what the eventual rules look like. But right this second, it's really strange that they're kind of taking these decisions, okay? The third thing I want to mention is just, or at least change, is just additional documentation, additional stuff. You know, to get into Colombia, you now have to have more stuff. You need more things, right? So, for example, they're making a huge emphasis on health and psychological certificates. Literally, they want to make sure that the people who come into the country are healthy, okay, and that they're psychologically sound. This is specific, but not exclusively for retirees, right? And think about it. This also, and we've seen this the past several months, it also applies to veterans. Because for veterans, they're now, the Colombian government is insisting that the veteran prove that they are not suffering from psychological issues, including PTSD, okay? So that's a big change, right? So
that's big, that's huge. That's huge.
That's huge, because now think about it. I'm a retiree, maybe I'm a veteran, maybe I'm not, but now I gotta figure out how to get a health certificate from someone that says that I'm healthy. And even if it says I'm sort of healthy, you know, does that mean I can't come to the country? Like, will they deny me a visa because of my health, right? This ties into a second thing that they're really focusing on, and that is travelers' insurance policies, right? This is now becoming more endemic. Most visas now require that you show that you have a solid traveler's insurance policy. This includes everything from health, right, to maybe maternity coverage if you're going to have a baby in Colombia, maybe death, dismemberment, anything that could happen that could create a cost. The Colombian government wants you to externalize it. They don't want anything to do with that. And they want you to prove that you have that before they give you a visa, right? So this goes into these health certificates. So maybe you're not the most healthy foreigner, right? You're a retiree, you're not the most healthy foreigner. But if you have a solid health insurance policy that will cover you, that you're paying, that you can prove that you can keep on paying, then yeah, we'll get you a visa, maybe. But maybe you aren't the most healthy person in the world. You don't have a solid travelers insurance policy or health insurance while you're in Colombia. Why will the Colombian government want to give you a visa? You know, could this mean that the Colombian government will then end up paying your expenses? That's the public policy argument, and it's a big deal, okay? The final thing that we're seeing documentation-wise is more and more they're requiring criminal background checks, okay? This is a thing, right? They're starting with retirement visas, right? But the idea is, and by the way, a lot of this, quite frankly, you can see this in other countries. You know, what the Colombian government is doing isn't strange or novel or anything. They're basically trying to professionalize the process. They're doing what a lot of people do in other countries. So they're trying to get to a point where they're just like Panama, where they're just like Mexico occasionally. It depends on the requirement. But they want to get to a point where they can confirm that they're giving people visas who actually deserve them for the reasons that they're saying that they need a visa for. Okay? Any questions on that?
That's crazy. So you say it's specific, the last one, it's specific for the criminal background check, that's specific to the retirement visa.
Retirement visa. But I will tell you right now, I will not put it past them to expand it all over the place, okay? The way your viewers should see this is this. Think about it from the perspective of managing a bureaucracy, right? You have a bunch of people reviewing these applications. There are systems in place in some of these much more developed countries, you know, the US, parts of Europe, where you send your information and there are databases that automatically check the information. So that makes the process easier. Colombia doesn't have that luxury all the time, but it's trying to get to that point. So as it's able to review more information, as it has the technical know-how to review the information, it's going to demand more and more information to ensure that it's complying or is consistent with international norms. So basically what they're doing is they're expanding, and every change in the rules allow them to become more like other countries on a regular basis. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah. I get it, but a lot of people aren't going to like, not necessarily that one, but but for vets, for expats, you know, who happen to be vets, who came back from war, a lot of the reason that they're here is because it's peaceful, it's tranquil. They're not back in the so-called matrix. That's going to be a big problem for a lot of vets. I see that being, out of everything you went over, that's going to be the one thing that upsets a lot of people.
Again, you might have heard this here first, but this is a thing. This is a thing that veterans are going to have to deal with. And again, I'm American, and I am a huge supporter of vets. We actually provide a discount on our services to vets. It's part of our services. But we have to be the bearer of bad news more and more to these guys because they're making it much more difficult for vets, for sure. That's the reality. And again, our focus as a law firm occasionally is advocacy, being somewhat even adversarial if we need to be, depending on the applicant. But with these new rules, if they're published as they're supposed to be published, you know, as they are, it's going to be challenging because the rules say whatever. So those challenges get more and more complicated.
Okay, what if you live here already, you're a vet, and you have a visa already? What happens then? When it has to be renewed?
So let's talk about that, right? So the first thing that needs to be said is if someone already has, whether they're a vet or just someone who has a normal migrant visa, which is the second as background. At the very top is the residency visa. This is what everyone wants. Below that is what's called the migrant visa, okay? These are visas for people who move to Colombia to live, to work, to invest, to whatever, but they're not necessarily residents. Below that, there's something called a visitor's visa, which is you're just passing through. Like you can stay for however long that visitor visa allows you for, but it doesn't have very many other benefits, okay? So if you're at this very top end, you're a resident already, maybe you bought that property and you got the residency visa way back when, maybe you have a migrant visa, again, second level, and you've kept it for 5 years and you received your residency visa, right? So the answer is once you have your residency visa, you don't exactly renew a residency visa. All you need to do is kind of update it, right? So with the new rules, they'll require you to get a new visa stamp after 2 years, okay? You got a residency visa, this thing comes into place. Within 2 years, you have to get a new visa stamp on your passport, okay? That's it, okay? And obviously the basis for your residency visa needs to remain the same. But basically, so long as nothing's changed, so long as you're still a resident, so long as you haven't lost your residency, you're fine, okay? Now, the second level, the migrant visa, okay, the way we read these proposed rules is that no one's gonna take your migrant visa away until it expires. If it expires, that means you're gonna have to apply under the new rules, okay? So there is a scenario where I have a migrant visa today, the new rules come into place, my visa then expires a year later or 2 years later, who knows? And then the visa I had earlier might be gone. And now I have to figure out a different type of visa to apply for. That is a scenario which is possible here with these new rules, okay? You can keep your visa. Like they're not gonna take away what you have. There's a legal constitutional issue there. But once it expires, you don't have a right necessarily to get the same visa again because that visa no longer exists. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
You're not the bearer of good news, Alan.
Don't kill the messenger. Again, part of what we do is to figure out what's going on. Once we figure out what's going on, we got to figure out how to deal with it. And then depending on our clients, we got to figure out how to deal with that specific client. And, you know, sometimes there's not much we can do. Sometimes we can do a lot. And a lot of what we do, unfortunately, is in those gray areas where we can push and push and push, and we work to get a really good result for that client. I want to mention one big change as well. It's a big one. And it relates to what we first talked about way back when, if you recall, right? And that was the marriage stuff, right? So I want to give you kind of a quick summary again of how to get a visa in Colombia when you're married, right?
Okay. I know we're getting going and there's a lot more to it, but there's so much, I can't keep it in one video. So make sure you stay tuned to part 2. I'll post it in a couple of days. In the meantime, here's a little bit of what we're going to talk about in part 2.
Colombia. So if you enter into what's called a common law marriage, in Colombia it's called Unión Marital de Hecho.
Yeah, that just surpassed the veterans part. There's going to be a lot of people upset with this one. When you spoke of the student visa and now they're allowing virtual, does that mean you're in country, you have to do your classes virtually, you have to show yourself on camera for 8 hours a day? Or
2-year visa. It will allow you to enter the country, multiple entries, exits for at least 2 years.
What can we do to get rid of check mig? Oh my God, that thing is killing us.
We have a YouTube channel, like it. Please comment and share if you like the video. Please subscribe and kick the bell.